Azad, can you tell us a little bit about your book, Hostile Homelands? And before that, can you kind of tell us why you wrote this book? Because this is quite a unique book. Tell us why you wrote this book and set up the core ideas of your book.
Thank you, Antony, as well for joining. It's been a long time coming that we meant to have this kind of conversation. I guess I wrote this book because Antony was writing the other book. So, but I was quite thrilled when I saw that he had written this book about the Palestine laboratory, in terms of, all of the other places and countries that are working with Israel and have worked with Israel for so many decades. It kind of, fits precisely into like the logic of my material as well. And the kind of background to this project, is situated in my background as someone growing up in South Africa, having these very particular ideas about India, growing up, and having this, having these thoughts about and connections with regards to India being friends with the South African anti-apartheid movement, and being one of the first countries to boycott South Africa, and also having these strong, pro-Palestine sentiments, right? And when I discovered Kashmir as a graduate student, about 20 years ago, I go down a rabbit hole and I realize that, India is actually not all that it's made out to be in terms of its foreign policy, in terms of its methodology, whether it is in India itself or in Kashmir. And when I traveled to Palestine several years later, I see the connections immediately between the two. And so it makes me, start thinking about the ways in which, Palestine and Kashmir are similar. And there isn't much of an appetite regarding that, in terms of talking about it, because whereas there's a sense of what Israel is about, especially amongst the left, India has had a free pass for several decades because of its position on the non-aligned movement, being a bastion of anti-colonialism because of Nehru, because of Gandhi, because even the left cinema that it created in the 50s as well. And so people don't really want to have a conversation about what actually is happening in India. And when Modi becomes prime minister in 2014 and he starts moving very much closer to Israel, sort of the mask comes off. And it allows me then to have a few more conversations, more transparent conversations with people. But it doesn't need me to see it. I mean, it becomes very clear that Modi and Netanyahu become very, very close, visiting each other's countries, talking about these two ancient civilizations coming together. But I would say that in 2019, when a senior diplomat in New York told a bunch of Kashmiri Hindus that they would replicate the Israeli settler model in Kashmir, when that happened, I think I pitched the book 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, because it was just like, okay, now it's time that we talk about this relationship. And so the book basically maps out a relationship between India and Israel. It starts off pre-partition of Palestine, pre-partition of the subcontinent. It moves to the military-industrial complex in terms of how these two countries cooperated with each other for several decades, despite there being no official ties between the two countries, which is exactly what Antony talks about in his book, where there's like this parallel foreign policy and diplomacy, that's run by the Israeli military. That's quite okay to build these relationships with other countries and other armies, no matter who they are, right? And the book then moves into this ideological link between Hindutva and Zionism to show that there's this sort of like kinship between the ideas of the state in many ways, and then kind of explores the diaspora in terms of the Indian diaspora and how they have operated with pro-Israeli Jewish groups, pro-Israeli Jewish groups in the US, and try to build this relationship between India. They precisely wanted India to come on board and become friends with Israel because it does a big service to the Israeli PR campaign, right? It's no longer a pariah state, for the larger global South as such. And then finally, we talk about Kashmir and Palestine and the kind of the similarities.